She heard him introduce another woman as his partner to 800 people. She recognized the gold bracelet on that woman's wrist. Darnell had said he lost it on a business trip. It still had the small scratch she remembered. Adais set her champagne down, picked up her coat, and walked to the elevator alone. She already knew every exit. She had owned 3 of the building's supply contracts for 6 years. The elevator doors closed. Behind them, the party continued. The 14th floor of the Meridian Tower in Birmingham, Alabama, was dressed up like it believed in itself. Floor-to-ceiling glass looked out over the city lights below. White linen tables held rows of champagne flutes, each one catching the warm gold of the recessed lighting above. A jazz quartet played near the far wall, smooth and low, the kind of music chosen to make men feel successful. Guests moved through the room in business casual that leaned formal, deal makers who had arrived with cards ready and smiles rehearsed. Adese Okonkwo Bellamy had arrived at 7:15. She wore a simple black and navy dress that she had owned for 3 years. She had stood near the entrance, holding a glass she did not drink from. She watched the room the way her grandfather had taught her to watch a warehouse floor, not at any single thing, at the whole shape of it. Darnell Bellamy worked this room like a man who had spent years practicing. He was her husband of 4 years, 38 years old, a business consultant with a firm that specialized in logistics advisory. He was good at surfaces, good at the handshake that went 1 second longer than necessary, at the laugh that arrived exactly on cue. He had built a reputation in this city on confidence. And confidence, Adais had learned, was something a person could perform for a long time before anyone asked for the receipts. She had been watching him for 11 minutes when the program director tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, we have a brief word from tonight's featured sponsor, Bellamy Advisory Group. Please welcome Darnell Bellamy and his partner, Tiffany Cruz." Darnell stepped forward from the left side of the room. Tiffany Cruz stepped forward from beside him, and his hand moved to the small of her back, not the brief, polite touch of a business introduction. A placement, deliberate and slow, the hand of a man who had made a decision and wanted the room to witness it. Tiffany Cruz was 34 years old, 4 years younger than Adais. She wore a burgundy wrap dress and heels that added 3 inches. She had the kind of composure that comes from knowing you are being watched and having decided you are comfortable with that. Her left wrist caught the light as she adjusted the microphone stand. Adais saw the bracelet. Gold, herringbone chain, a small toggle clasp. She had seen that bracelet every morning for 2 months before it disappeared. Darnell had told her he left it somewhere in a hotel room in Memphis. Not her gift to him, but one she had held, moved, set beside the bathroom sink. She knew its weight. She knew the small scratch on the inner surface of the clasp because her thumbnail had caught it the last evening they sat at the same dinner table without pretending. He had given it to Tiffany, or Tiffany had taken it. Either way, it was on another woman's wrist, 20 feet from where Adais stood. Vivienne Bellamy, Darnell's mother, materialized at Adais's left elbow. Vivienne was 62, a woman who had never been in a room without knowing who held the most power and positioning herself accordingly. She turned to the woman on her other side, the wife of one of Darnell's investment contacts, and spoke at a volume designed to carry. "That boy has needed this for a long time," Vivienne said. "Some women just hold a man back without even realizing it." She paused. "Some women were never the right fit to begin with. They're just placeholders until the real thing comes along." She did not look at Adais once. From the bar across the room, Reginald Bellamy, Darnell's older brother, wide-shouldered, always laughing at the wrong moment, raised his glass in Tiffany's direction. He had shaken Tiffany's hand before he shook Adais's. He had called Tiffany the future in a low voice, meant to be confidential, and wasn't. Portia Bellamy, the youngest, stood beside Reginald, already holding up her phone. She photographed Darnell and Tiffany at the microphone, and her thumb moved across the screen before the shutter sound had finished. A heart, posted. Adais did not move for 7 seconds. She counted them. Then she set her champagne glass on the nearest table, gently, without a sound, reached for her coat on the chair behind her, and walked toward the elevator bank. Her heels made no sound on the carpeted floor. She passed 4 people she knew. She said nothing to any of them. She pressed the down button and stood with her back straight, her face composed, looking at the brushed steel of the elevator doors. The doors opened. She stepped inside. In the basement parking level, the fluorescent lighting hummed blue-white and cold. Adaiz sat in her car for a long time without starting the engine. The parking structure was quiet, except for the distant sound of ventilation. She opened the center console and took out the brass compass. It was small enough to sit in her palm. The casing was worn smooth at the edges, the face slightly tarnished, the needle still responsive. It swung east, then steadied. On the back, scratched in letters that had softened with age, E.O. 1971. She held it between both hands and looked at it until the needle stopped moving. Then she took out her phone and typed a message to Simone Achebe. "It's time to move. I need the full picture by Friday." Simone replied in 3 minutes. "I'll have everything ready. Get some sleep." Adaiz started the car and drove home through the empty streets. She had not come from money. She had come from Meridian, Mississippi, a railroad town with August heat that pressed against the skin like a hand, and winter mornings where the fog sat low over the train yards until 10 o'clock. Her father died when she was 7. Her mother worked night shifts at the hospital and slept through the mornings. And Papa Emeka filled the hours her mother couldn't. His full name was Nena Emeka Okonkwo. He had come from the Anambra region of Nigeria in 1971 with $300, a duffel bag, and a brass compass he had carried since he was 19. He was not a man who explained himself. He did not sit Adaiz down and deliver lessons. He simply lived his life in front of her and trusted that she was paying attention. She was. Every morning before sunrise, Papa Emeka was already at the kitchen table with his ledger, a composition notebook with a black and white marbled cover, filled with columns of handwritten figures in pencil, income from the warehouses, expenses, notes about tenants, repairs, contracts. He drank his coffee and wrote in the dark, the lamp on the table casting a small yellow circle. By the time Adaiz came downstairs for school, he was already on his second cup, already thinking about the day ahead. He never explained what he was writing, but once a month, on a Saturday, he would say to Adaiz, "Come with me." They would drive his truck along the state roads south of town, stopping at each of the 7 warehouses he owned in Lauderdale County and into the next county over. They walked the floors together. He checked the overhead doors, the loading docks, the drainage at the back corners. He ran his hand along the steel support columns the way a doctor checks a pulse. He never asked Adaiz if she was bored. He never explained what she was seeing. He only asked, after each one, "Can you find your way back from here?" She always could. Papa Emeka had a saying he returned to the way some people return to a hymn. He said it in the truck, or over dinner, or sometimes to himself while he sat on the porch. The ground knows what it holds before anyone asks. Adaiz did not fully understand it until the night he placed his brass compass in her hands. She was 15. She had been sitting in the waiting area of Rush Foundation Hospital for 2 hours, alone, under fluorescent lights that gave everyone the color of old paper. Papa Emeka had been brought in that afternoon with chest pain that turned out to be a blockage. The surgical team needed to operate that evening. They had explained this to Adaiz because she was the only one there, and she had nodded like an adult and sat back down in the plastic chair. At 10 o'clock, they came to take him to the operating room. He was on a gurney in a hospital gown, diminished in the way that hospitals make all people smaller. No truck, no ledger, no coffee cup, no warehouse floor, but his eyes were the same. He reached into the pocket of the gown, and Adaiz did not know until that moment that he had carried the compass in there with him, or that he meant to give it to her. He placed it in her palm without speaking. She looked up at him. His expression was not frightened. It was something closer to finished, the face of a man who had done what he came to do and was willing to let the rest be as it was. Then he said, quietly, so only she could hear, "The ground knows what it holds before anyone asks." The orderly pushed the gurney through the double doors. The surgery lasted 7 hours and 18 minutes. Papa Emeka did not survive. He left behind 7 warehouses in Lauderdale and Clark counties, a ledger full of penciled figures, and a legal document that transferred everything to a days on her 22nd birthday. 3 months before that, she had graduated from the University of Alabama with a degree in supply chain management and a minor in finance. She read every document 3 times before she signed anything. The 7 warehouses sat along old freight corridors, the kind of properties that looked ordinary to people who did not understand what the ground they sat on had once carried and would carry again. Interstate routing patterns were shifting. E-commerce was reorganizing the geography of American distribution. Adais had spent 4 years studying exactly this, and she recognized what Papa Emeka had seen 40 years earlier when no one else was looking. She did not sell. She waited. At 25, she signed a long-term lease with a regional distribution company that needed staging capacity along the Interstate 20 corridor. The first month's income exceeded her mother's annual salary. She did not tell her mother. She did not tell anyone. She spent the next 3 years acquiring adjacent properties, old depot buildings in Alabama, disused railside warehouses in western Tennessee, underpriced facilities in the Mississippi Delta that larger investors overlooked because they did not see the infrastructure the ground was already holding. She structured everything through Okonkwo Logistics Trust, a legal entity that held all assets under fiduciary title. Her name did not appear in any public record. When industry databases listed the trust's properties, they showed only an administrative contact, Simone Achebe, attorney of record. By the time Adais was 31, the trust held 35 warehouse facilities, 6 distribution centers, and 2 rail depot properties across 4 states. Total assessed value, $1.1 billion. Every tenant paid on time. Every facility ran without incident. Every contract was structured to Simone's exacting standard. None of this was visible from the outside. From the outside, Adaize Okonkwo Bellamy was a quiet woman who worked in supply chain consulting and cooked well and never raised her voice. She had a husband who was good at surfaces. She had a mother-in-law who had made her feelings clear from the 2nd year of the marriage. She had in-laws who saw what they expected to see and stopped looking. She had met Darnell at an industry conference in Atlanta when she was 29. She had gone as an observer. He had gone to build contacts. He found her in the break between morning sessions, standing at the coffee station, and he introduced himself with the particular confidence of a man who had decided he was interesting. He was charming in the specific way of people who have practiced it, the right questions asked, the right amount of attention held. He told her she was different from most people in the room. Real, he said. Grounded. She thought about Papa Emeka's empty chair at the kitchen table. About the ledger. About the compass in her coat pocket. She thought, he does not know what grounded means. But she liked the way he laughed. She liked that he seemed to want to build something. She said yes when he asked for her number, and yes 8 months later when he asked her to marry him. She wore the brass compass under her dress at the wedding, on a leather cord against her sternum, because it was the only piece of him she could bring. She did not tell Darnell about the trust. Papa Emeka had said something to her once that she had never repeated to anyone. He had said, "The men I met when I had nothing are the only men I trust now that I have something." He was not warning her about anyone in particular. He was telling her something true about the world. She kept it. She wanted to know that Darnell loved her. The woman who got up at 6 in the morning and made coffee and drove to work and came home and was simply present. Not the woman whose name was attached to $1,100 million in logistics infrastructure. She wanted to know that first. She never got the chance to find out. 3 months before the cocktail party, she was sorting laundry. She reached into the chest pocket of a dress shirt and found a folded receipt from a hotel in Memphis. The room type was double occupancy. The date was a Tuesday. Darnell had told her he went alone. She held the receipt for a long moment, looking at the paper. Then she folded it along its original crease and placed it in her own wallet, behind her transit card, where it sat without comment for 12 weeks. She did not ask. She watched. She was good at watching. The Friday after the cocktail party, Simone Achebe came to the house with a leather portfolio and 2 cups of coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, the same kind of table Papa Emeka had sat at every morning, Adais thought, though she did not say this, and Simone laid out the complete picture. Corporate dissolution of the marital finances, legal structure of the trust, which had never been marital property because it predated the marriage by 7 years. Documentation of the hotel receipts, the phone records, the bracelet, clean lines, nothing disputed. Adais looked at the documents for a long time. "You're certain," Simone said. It was not a question. "I am certain," Adais said. "Then I need you to read this last piece," Simone said, sliding a single page across the table. "The Southern Supply Chain Summit Awards Gala, Nashville. 6 weeks from now. You've been asked to accept a Lifetime Recognition Award on behalf of Okonkwo Logistics Trust." Adais looked up. "The committee has known about the trust for 2 years," Simone said. "They've been trying to identify the principals. I confirmed your identity to them last week, with your authorization, obviously." She paused. "Darnell Bellamy has also been nominated for a separate award at the same event. His office already RSVP'd. His family will be there." Adais was quiet for a moment. She turned the brass compass over in her fingers. She had taken it from her coat pocket when Simone arrived, a habit without a name. Then she said, "Make sure we have a projector. I want the full asset map on screen." The gala was held on a Friday in October at the Pinnacle Grand Hotel in Nashville, a ballroom that sat 800 people at round tables dressed in white and gold. The ceiling was 30 feet high, with chandeliers that hung in clusters like enormous iron flowers. The room smelled of cut orchids and warm bread. Men in tuxedos and women in floor-length gowns moved through the space with the particular ease of people who were comfortable being seen. Darnell Bellamy arrived at 7 o'clock with Tiffany Cruz on his arm, dressed as though he expected the evening to confirm something about him. His tuxedo was custom. His cufflinks caught the light. He worked the room the same way he had worked every room Adais had ever watched him in. The extended handshake, the laugh at the right moment, the name-dropping delivered as though it cost him nothing. Vivian Bellamy came through the main entrance behind Reginald and Portia. She wore her best dress. She had already told 3 people at the pre-dinner reception that her son was being recognized tonight. She was the mother of a man being honored. She held that fact the way some people hold a glass of wine, not quite drinking it, just pleased to have it. None of them knew Adais was already inside. She had arrived through the side entrance at 6:45. She wore a floor-length gown in deep navy black. No jewelry except the brass compass on a thin leather cord at her throat, worn openly above her neckline where it could be seen. Simone walked beside her, in charcoal gray, carrying a sealed legal envelope and a small laptop. They found the event coordinator, confirmed the technical setup, and took their seats at a table near the stage, facing the room. Adais did not look for Darnell's table. She knew where it was. The program moved through the early awards with efficiency, regional excellence, emerging company, sustainability initiative. Darnell accepted his award near the end of the first half, and Adais watched him at the microphone from across the room. He thanked his team, his family, his vision. He was good at speeches. The room applauded. He returned to his table and put his hand on the back of Tiffany's chair. The program director returned to the podium after the intermission. "Before we move to our final award of the evening," he said, "we have an unscheduled addition to the program, a recognition that has been a long time coming." A murmur went through the room. Unscheduled additions at black tie galas created a particular kind of attention. Simone Achebe rose from the table. She walked to the podium with the sealed envelope and stood for a moment, settling the room with the stillness of someone accustomed to being listened to. "I am Simone Achebe, attorney of record for Okonkwo Logistics Trust," she said. "Before I introduce tonight's honoree, I need to read one brief legal statement into the public record." The room was completely quiet now. "Okonkwo Logistics Trust," she read, is the owner of record of 35 warehouse facilities, 6 distribution centers, and 2 rail depot properties across Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Louisiana. The trust is further identified as the controlling interest in 3 active advisory service contracts with Bellamy Advisory Group, all of which are terminated effective today, per notice of material misrepresentation. Copies of the termination documents have been served. She closed the envelope, and now, with great pride, I introduce the sole trustee of Okonkwo Logistics Trust, Miss Adaize Okonkwo Bellamy. The screen behind the stage filled with light. A map appeared, 4 states outlined in white, each warehouse and distribution center marked with a point of amber light. 35 warehouses, 6 distribution centers, 2 depot sites. The lights covered the map like a constellation, the kind of map that makes a room understand, all at once, the shape of something they have been inside without knowing it. Adaize walked from the table to the stage. She wore no expression that could be read as triumph. She wore no expression that could be read as grief. She walked the way Papa Emeka had walked through his warehouse floors, not quickly, not slowly, with the particular steadiness of someone who knows every inch of the ground beneath them. She stood at the center of the stage and looked out at the room. 800 people. She did not use the podium. She stood in front of it, the map behind her, the compass at her throat catching the stage light. She found Darnell's table. He was already looking at her. His hands were flat on the white tablecloth. His face had the quality of a man trying to understand something in a language he does not speak. Beside him, Tiffany's confident posture had gone very still. Adaize spoke without raising her voice. Okonkwo Logistics Trust has operated in this region for 11 years, she said. You have used our facilities. You have signed our contracts. You have shipped through our corridors without knowing my name. She paused. My name is Adaize Okonkwo Bellamy, and as of this morning, I am the only Okonkwo Bellamy in that name. A sound moved through the room. Not applause, not yet. Something more like the intake of breath before understanding arrives. My grandfather came to Mississippi in 1971 with $300 and 7 acres of freight land that no one else wanted. He understood something about this country that most people missed. He understood that what moves things has value, not the things themselves, the movement, the corridors, the ground that holds the weight of everything passing through. She reached up and touched the brass compass at her throat. One brief contact. Then her hand returned to her side. He left me 7 warehouses and a ledger full of penciled numbers. I built the rest in the same way he built his, quietly, without announcement, without asking anyone's permission. Her eyes returned to Darnell's table. Someone told me recently that I had nothing, no power, nowhere to go. Those words were meant to diminish me. Instead, they told me everything I needed to know about the person who said them. She did not look away from Darnell as she said this. She did not raise her voice. She was as calm as a compass needle after it has found its direction. I did not come here tonight to perform a reckoning. I came here to introduce myself. I should have done it a long time ago. She looked back at the full room. The trust will be announcing, next month, a new initiative, the Emeka Corridors Project, workforce development centers in 3 southern cities, training women in logistics operations, supply chain management, and property stewardship, because the ground should know who holds it, and more women should know how to hold ground. She stepped back from the microphone. The woman at the third table stood up. Her name was Carolyn Marsh, Chief Operating Officer of a regional freight company. She had worked with the trust for 4 years through intermediaries and had always wondered who was behind the entity. She began to clap, not the enthusiastic applause of a person caught up in spectacle, the deliberate, certain applause of someone paying a debt they did not know they owed. The room followed. Within 15 seconds, more than half the ballroom was standing. At Darnell's table, no one stood. Tiffany Cruz rose from her chair, not to applaud, but to leave. She picked up her evening bag, pressed it against her side, and moved through the seated guests toward the back of the room. She did not look at Darnell. She did not look back at the stage. The burgundy dress that had made her look so certain at the cocktail party 2 months earlier now made her visible in exactly the way she did not want to be. People watched her go. She did not stop. Darnell sat in his tuxedo with his hands flat on the tablecloth. The award he had accepted earlier in the evening was still in front of him. The room was on its feet around him. He did not move. His 3 contracts with Bellamy Advisory Group represented 60% of his firm's annual revenue. He understood what terminated effective today meant. He was calculating the rest of it in real time, adding and subtracting the way Papa Emeka had added and subtracted in the early mornings, except Papa Emeka had always come out ahead. Reginald Bellamy had spent the past 14 months pursuing a business loan from a private equity fund. He saw the fund's principal now, a man named Gerald Osei, who had been introduced to him through the trust's network, watching him from across the room with a particular expression, not hostile, simply resolved. Reginald understood, in that moment, that the loan review would not go in his direction. He sat down heavily. Portia looked at her phone. The Instagram story she had posted the night of the cocktail party, the one with the heart, had been screenshot and reshared by hundreds of accounts in the past 48 hours. Each one was captioned with things she would not be able to answer. She turned the phone face down on the table. Vivian Bellamy sat very straight, the way she always sat. But something had gone out of her posture. The quality of absolute certainty that had been her primary expression for 62 years. She looked at her son. He did not look back at her. The room was still applauding. Adais walked off the stage from the side she had entered. She did not look at Darnell's table as she passed. She returned to her seat, where Simone was already closing the laptop. "Well," Simone said quietly. "Well," Adais said. They stayed for the final award. They left before the dessert course. In the lobby, 3 people stopped Adais. 2 were industry contacts who introduced themselves with the urgency of people who had been circling something important for years and had just found the center of it. The 3rd was a woman who pressed Adaisi's hand between both of hers and said only, "Your grandfather would be very proud." Adais said, "I hope so." She meant it without performance. 14 months later, on a Thursday afternoon in late November, Adais Okonkwo Bellamy sat at her desk in the building that had once been the first warehouse Papa Emeka ever owned. She had reclaimed it from the trust's portfolio and converted the administrative wing into her primary office. The walls were the original brick, the deep red of old industrial Mississippi left bare. The ceiling was high, the original steel trusses painted black. Light came through tall windows on the south wall, late afternoon light, amber gold, the kind that makes old brick look like it is lit from within. Somewhere in the train yards 2 blocks east, a locomotive moved through a crossing. The sound of it, the low horn, the heavy rumble, came through the windows and settled in the room like something familiar. Her desk was large and clear. A laptop, 2 folders, a ceramic mug of coffee. In the corner of the desk, beside a framed photograph of Papa Emeka, standing in front of this building in 1983, sat the brass compass, face up, catching the afternoon light. A group of 4 architects sat across from her. 2 women, 2 men, all of them in their 30s, all of them with the careful energy of people who understood they were in the presence of someone worth impressing. They had rolled out preliminary drawings for the Emeka Corridors project. 3 sites, 3 cities, each one a former industrial facility being converted into a workforce training center. The drawings showed open floor plans, tool libraries, computer labs, communal kitchens, the kind of space that invites people in and teaches them that they belong inside it. Adais had been asking precise questions for 40 minutes, not about aesthetics, about load-bearing walls, about utility infrastructure, about the service roads that would need to handle the volume of people coming and going, about whether the floors could take the weight. "The ground should know what it holds," she said at one point, without elaborating. The architects wrote it down. When they left, she sat with the quiet of the office for a moment. In the far corner, Marcus Tate was finishing a math worksheet at a small table Adais kept there for this exact purpose. He was 12 years old, son of her operations manager, home because the elementary school had a teacher workday. She had set a glass of water and a piece of dark chocolate beside him when he arrived, without comment. He had said thank you in the formal, slightly surprised way of a child who had not expected it. She looked at him now. He was frowning at a problem, his pencil moving in small circles the way pencils do when a person is thinking rather than writing. She thought about Papa Emeka's kitchen table, the composition notebook, the lamp, making its yellow circle in the dark. Some things carry forward the way freight carries forward, through corridors, through years, through the hands of people who understood before being told what they were holding. Adais picked up the brass compass. She did not think about the gala. She did not think about Darnell's face above his white tablecloth, or Tiffany's burgundy dress moving toward the exit, or Vivian's certainty going quiet. Those images had faded in the way that images fade when they no longer have anything to teach. She thought about a hospital waiting room at 10 o'clock at night. She thought about a man in a paper gown reaching into his pocket for something he had carried since 1971, placing it in the hands of a 15-year-old girl without a word of explanation. The explanation was the act itself. She thought, I understood you, Papa. I tried to be worthy of it. She set the compass down beside the photograph. The needle swung once, then steadied, pointing the same direction it had always pointed. Outside, the train horn sounded again, longer this time, fading as it moved south along the old freight line, the same line that had made this land worth something before anyone thought to ask. Adais picked up her coffee and turned back to the drawings on her desk. There was still a great deal of ground left to hold. A compass doesn't argue with anyone. It simply points to what is true. Drop one word in the comments, the word that describes what Adais's grandfather gave her that Darnell never could.